produced and distributed by Keep the Faith.
Greetings. My name is Joe FERRARA, and welcome to Catholic Update. Our subject this evening is the Catholic Church and the Homosexual Network. Our guests are Mr. Paul Morrissey, who heads up Morality Action Committee, and Mr. Andrew MCCAULEY, who heads up the Committee in Defense of St. Patrick's Cathedral, and also a leading official in the Catholic War Veterans. Gentlemen, let's get right down to it. Is there such a thing as a homosexual Catholic network, or is this a figment of somebody's imagination?
Well, Joe, I'll tell you, first of all, the term Catholic and homosexual is a contradiction in terms. But there is a group, Dignity, and a couple of other homosexual groups that claim to be Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
And they are extensive in this country and worldwide. There are
a local chapter there.
There is a New York chapter, but I think there are 114 chapters of Dignity in this country, and they have infiltrated the church. They have created an extensive network of influence, especially in certain chancery offices in various dioceses, and they are attempting to alter the whole moral structure and teaching of the Catholic Church to accept sodomy and perversion as a normal way of life.
This is an incredible story you're telling us here. Are they active now in New York City?
They are active. They're very active, as a matter of fact. They're one of the main sponsors and groups in the Gay Pride Parade that's held in June every year.
I should add here, just not to interrupt Andy, but they were active in New York Archdiocese and Brooklyn Diocese up until recently, Joe. They have been actually removed from both Brooklyn and New York by the bishops and the cardinals of the area.
Weren't you involved recently in Donnybrook over this gay mass they're holding at St. Xavier's in New York?
Well, both Andy and myself and a lot of other people, several hundred Catholics, did demonstrate outside St. Francis Xavier in January of this year. And we have held meetings with the Jesuits from the provincial office in Fordham University, trying to negotiate Dignity out of the Archdiocese. The problem we found, Joe, in New York was, in fact, that the Archdiocese, although they do have jurisdiction over St. Francis Xavier, it is run by the Jesuits, and they had to tread, if you were somewhat diplomatically, to get Dignity out. But enough pressure was brought to bear where we were able to convince them that it was the prudent thing to do.
Let me play the devil's advocate here for a moment. What's wrong with Dignity? They tell us, and this is their story and these are their words, they're telling us, look, I was born this way. I can't help being what I am. Now you people as good Christians and compassionate Catholics should accept us for what we are.
why are you keeping us outside of our church? This is a totally uncharitable and callous way to treat us.
Well, I'd like to answer that, Joe. First of all, no one is keeping them outside of the church. The church is a union of believers. If you believe in what the Catholic Church teaches, you are a member of the church. And if you have been baptized in it and you believe its teachings. If you do not, if you believe its teachings and you renounce it and practice things that are contrary to it and justify these things, you are no longer a Catholic, because it is a union of believers. Now they can say that we are Catholics until they're blue in the face, but that's like a man who sits down to a steak dinner and tells everyone around him, I'm a vegetarian. Well, he eats the steak. He can say it till he's blue in the face, he is not a vegetarian. There is a certain thing that makes you a Catholic. And it is a contradiction in terms to say I am pro-sodomy, I am a practicing sodomite, and a Catholic. They are two contradictions. If they belong to a church, it's to Satan's church, because this is Satan's idea of what sex should be. It is not the Catholic Church, it's not Christ's idea.
And another point, too, is that if you call yourself a homosexual Catholic and then go on to say, well, then I'm celibate, that is a contradiction. That's like the thief saying, or somebody who has a proclivity towards stealing things, and saying, well, I'm a thief, when in fact he hasn't stolen anything at all. His tendency may be to steal things, but he's not a thief until he commits the act. And this is the same with the homosexual, that if he's going to call himself a homosexual, he can only do that by virtue of the fact that he's practicing that proclivity.
But hasn't the church taught for 2,000 years at least that this thing called sodomy is indeed a sin?
Yes.
So therefore, all their hues and cry about the church's stand on this matter is really not germane to what the church has been teaching for 2,000 years.
That's correct. It's like...
In other words, what we're saying here is that nothing new has been defined. This is an old story.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
Right.
What you brought up before, Joe, the fact that they say I was born with this orientation, that is an argument that they often make. And it's an argument that a lot of people accept. They say, I was born with this orientation, I didn't cultivate it, therefore it's natural. Well, first of all, they're using the word natural in an improper way. A man can be born with an inclination or a tendency
For murder, for example.
to murder
Or rape.
or rape or violent temper. Because he has this by his nature or disposition. Doesn't mean it's natural, in the sense that it fits in with the natural order of things. Doesn't mean it's good. In fact, the human race, we have the church, we have laws, religious laws, secular laws, we have all kinds of things to compensate for all these aberrations within mankind and to prevent them from getting out of control. Everybody accepts these things as weaknesses or flaws in themselves
Of human nature.
Except one group, the sodomites. They say this is good because we have it. They have this attitude that every bat squeak of passion that we have is somehow good, and everything that we want and want to do has to be good because we want to do it. This is the height of narcissism. Is what it is. They make themselves the alpha.
What you're saying then, Andy, is that the ultimate sin here is that they're denying the existence of sin altogether.
That's right. That, I think, is where they do the greatest damage to themselves and society.
Well, then they're really agents of anarchy, aren't they?
Moral anarchy.
They are, and I think Rabbi Handler summed it up admirably when at the gay rights hearings last year, he came out with a statement that if people were born this way, would God have called this an abomination? Would God call his own handiwork an abomination, which is what he referred to homosexuality in the Bible as? If you just think about that a moment, it's obvious that they're wrong. But they were born.
But there's more here than meets the eye.
Ralph Waldo Emerson one time said there's a crack in all of nature. And by that he meant that in all of nature, people, things, there are flaws. This is a flawed universe. And people are flawed also.
We're all a problem, one way or another.
And yet, this is a problem because God created the universe. God is perfect. Now, how did these flaws, these cracks, get in the universe? The Catholic Church tells us how. Because of original sin, this great act of the free will of mankind sundered the universe and caused cracks, psychological cracks in people, illnesses, diseases, all kind of things that we look upon as bad and which are bad, all kind of things out of harmony with each other are the result of original sin. Now,
I would like to just embellish that a little bit.
Can I just complete the thought?
Okay.
Well, where the homosexuals fail, or what they fail to understand, is that everything in the world is not necessarily good because it exists.
True.
And a lot of the problems that we have today in the world is because we have denied original sin and its effects. We are acting like whatever we do has to be good because this is the best of all possible worlds.
Right.
And behind so many of the heresies today we have in the church, a moral decay is this denial of original sin and its effect. And they're like a people who button up their coat. They get up to here and they say, well, they got all the buttons buttoned, but they start with the wrong one. They look down to find the one at the bottom hasn't been buttoned.
They missed the button.
They missed a button. That button is original sin. And this is I would say, the mother of all the heresies. This denial of original sin is the mother of all the heresies, or most of them, and the moral decay in this country.
It's the root of all our problems,
Right.
isn't it? Paul, did you want to say something?
Yes, I just wanted to go along on the same theme, but to attack it from a little bit of a different angle, and that is that what the homosexuals don't seem to understand is that this problem that they have, they cannot accept it for what it really is, and that is a cross. If they accepted homosexuality as or the tendency towards homosexual activity that they have, they accept it as a cross that they have to carry through life, as we all have our own crosses in one way or another, then they could, in their own mind and in their own soul, understand how they can deal with that particular problem. But they won't accept it as a cross. In fact, I can remember about 5 years ago speaking on this very thing in New York City gay rights hearings, and I brought this particular point up of the cross, and there were about 300 homosexuals in that room, and to a man they stood up and they shouted to me, "Sieg Heil, Sieg Heil." It was such veracity that they had to call in extra security just to surround me for me to continue to finish off what I was.
In other words, what you're saying is if you oppose them, you're a Nazi.
That's it. Yes, you're a fascist and you're a Nazi, and
we become prototypes. If you're for God and country, you're a suspect. Is this what it's come down to?
that's
right.
But, all the remarks have been well taken and certainly on target. But they're not going to go away. You're not dealing here with a ragtag group of downtrodden individuals. The homosexual movement, if it exists, and indeed I believe that it does, is well educated, well financed, and it has its own agenda and certainly its own long-term goals. And I think it behooves all of us to take note of what these people are up to, because they mean to run our society. They mean to control our children, and they mean to set the standards for the way we live our lives.
Yes, and I'll tell you,
And they're not fooling around.
they have struck at the, they're trying to capture the organization that has set all the standards for the Western world for 2,000 years, the Catholic Church. This is the first heresy within the Church which has attacked a basic morality. Other heresies have to do with dogma and doctrine. the nature of God and Christ and so on and so forth. This is the first heresy that goes right to basic morality. And they're in the church, and they're celebrating the Mass in the church, and they are using the Eucharist to celebrate and glorify perversion.
That's the blasphemy of blasphemies, isn't it?
That's the abomination of abominations, which has never happened in the church before. Before, it was called a black Mass, and it was done outside of the church.
In secret.
Outside of the institutional church, in secret. Today, for the first time, this abomination is going on with the permission, with the blessing of the bishops, of many bishops.
That's incredible.
It's incredible.
And not only that, but they like to embellish it. For example, in St. Francis Xavier in New York, where we had this problem up until recently.
That's a Jesuit.
That was a Jesuit-run church,
Yeah.
yes. They had, on several occasions, a man dressed up in drag as a woman, as a Eucharistic minister, giving out communion. They have an organization, a subgroup of dignity, which is called the Defenders.
The Defenders?
Defenders.
What in the world is that?
Well, from what I've heard, that it is what they call an S&M group. It's a sadomasochistic sexual group of homosexuals within the Catholic Church. Now, if they're in Manhattan, or were in Manhattan, using church facilities, just where else are they in the United States? This is something that groups such as mine, organizations, the Knights of Columbus, whatever Catholic organization who still have some semblance of faith left, you better get cracking on this and weed out and find out, get information, attend their meetings. They also have social meetings after the Mass where they have their own political agenda. They have fundraising activities which are advertised and so on. I mean, they go from soup to nuts. In fact, I got their financial statement of New York Dignity. They got $16,000 in the kitty, if you please.
That's only one chapter.
That's just one chapter of 120 odd.
Well, one of their spokesmen boasted that they control 20 million votes. Now, that may well be an exaggeration. But one thing is certain, that there is networking taking place here. The 3,000 odd organizations that exist in this country, homosexual organizations, are interlocking. And they can rise as one force, one power, and concentrate their energies and their monies and their talents on any given target at any given time. Don't you find this frightening?
That is frightening, John. I'll tell you, it is almost a reverse of normal society.
It's a reversal of reality.
What you've had in the past is you've had normal people, people who try to be decent, coalesce to form institutions like the church, the state, the Grange or the Oaks or anything, a baseball league. Now in this country of today, I think what you're seeing is a shattering and a fragmentation of this socialization among normal people. There's been a flight to the suburbs. People are not in contact with each other. There are no more neighborhoods.
There's an isolation.
Lodges. There's an isolation. At the same time, all the social misfits, perverts, sexual perverts, are coalescing. In the past, these people hardly met. They didn't have any institutional groups. If they were part of any institutional groups, they had to stay in the closet and not flaunt their vices. Now they are coalescing around their perversions and forming institutions.
They're raising their banners.
While other institutions of normal people are fragmenting. It's a frightening situation, and what it really comes down to is that society, the normal cells in society, are decaying, and the abnormal cells are growing like a cancer.
You're describing a deadly cancer.
Clinically, it's a spiritual cancer. It destroyed ancient Rome, it destroyed ancient Greece.
And it's well destroying us if it keeps going its course.
Yeah, but I have something I'd like to point out, and that is that one of the things that I noticed in the newsletter in St. Francis Xavier Church was that they had a fundraising effort advertised in their newsletter down at a sadomasochistic club in the village. for the Gay Veterans Association. This Gay Veterans Association, I was recently in court with these people, and for allegedly spray painting their banner, which they were part and parcel of the gay veterans.
You would do a thing like that, wouldn't you?
No, as a matter of fact, I didn't do it, but I got nailed by the judge for doing it. I would have got 15 days in the cooler, or $310 fine. Right now, I'm appealing that. But here is an organization which is getting its funding, okay, so that they can finance taking me to court.
That's incredible.
And you know, an organization, so just what Andy says, the American Veterans Association, allow these people, these perverts, to walk down and, by innocence by association, the Catholic Church, the war veterans, whatever organization they hook onto, they get more and more legitimate.
It gives them a legitimacy, a presence.
Exactly.
That's a good phrase, Paul, innocence by association.
I stole it from you.
Here again, reverse of reality.
But what you mentioned before was at the socials after their mass, after the Dignity Mass. Now I got Joe, I got a newsletter here, the Dignity newsletter.
From the calendar?
Yeah, from June 1984.
Mm-hmm.
Now, after their so-called masses at St. Francis Xavier, they would have a social next door in the
On the church property?
church property.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to read this one little thing from this newsletter. Gay men, now it's an article in here about how some guys get all the men, and other guys go looking for men and can't find them, and urging in the spirit of Christian charity to share each other for a one-night stand. Now, I'll just read this little thing. Gay men, when they go into a bar or other gay meeting place, perhaps the Dignity Social after Mass, in the hope of finding a companion for a night, or whatever range of time seems suitable to them, treat sex as an economic resource in the sense they view it as a commodity. Now, they're admitting here that they use these socials after Mass at St. Francis Xavier to pick up other guys and go to
On church property.
On church property.
Now, if you know this, and Paul knows this, and I now know it, certainly the bishop must have known this.
I have gotten most of these things from the Archdiocese himself. I don't know, I can't say the bishop knows about it, but they keep a file on this organization and have for years, and I can only say what took them so long to end this abomination.
Paul, you've been at this thing for a long time.
Yes.
You keep complaining about middle management in the church, making it very difficult to reach the cardinal or the bishop with the problems in his diocese.
Yes. Yes.
Has this been your experience on the line?
Constantly. I have sent letters, I sent telegrams, I even sent $50 telegram to Lebanon when the cardinal visited last time, in an effort to reach him, as it were, in some other form that hadn't been used. I had to infiltrate through security at JFK once, just to get to the cardinal.
You did that?
Yes, I did, and I got to the cardinal, but my copy of my telegram didn't get to him because his secretaries, which surround him like bees around a honey jar, snatched it out of my hand, or his hand rather. So the cardinal's completely buffered, and the middle management in the Catholic Church have been asleep for the last 20 years. And right now they're just starting to awake, but what they're trying to do is to prevent people like me from getting the job done, from getting to the cardinal, setting up a meeting with the local bishop and so on. It's absolutely impossible to do. And as far as Catholic newspapers is concerned, just try getting one of your letters to the editor printed. It's like pulling teeth. Forget it. They're not interested in the Orthodox perspective in the Catholic papers. They're not.
You're describing a conspiracy of silence here.
Conspiracy of silence, and sometimes downright just intentionally get in your way and do the opposite.
But in defense of the cardinal, they did ban this homosexual mass, didn't they?
Oh, yes, indeed they did, yes. But it was only after a great deal of pressure was put on them. In fact, I had press conferences right on in front of St. Patrick's Cathedral.
Well, the Ratzinger letter had something to do with it, too.
I would say the Ratzinger letter had was the thing, and they really, I think, had to after that. Why these bishops here in this country, in America, can only do what's obviously right after they get pressure from Rome, I don't know. It seems that it takes Rome to instigate every single move that common sense would dictate.
Maybe they can't believe things are as bad as we say they are.
Well, I'll tell you, I think that
Maybe that's the right
part of the
thing.
problem is that these people, a lot of our bishops, have a relativistic view of morality and have been, infected with a lot of the aberrations of modernism.
Well, maybe the Chancery office has become too sensitive to lobbying.
Well, they are a political group.
Well, I'll tell you, Joe, they're also, I think, afraid in this country to buck the tide, I think. I
think
remember
you're getting to the philosophical root of this problem.
I remember one time when I wanted the Archdiocese to take some action in regard to some sacrilegious, I forget whether it was a play or a movie.
A play down.
Well, I was involved in a lot of this, these campaigns against sacrilegious plays and movies and magazines and things. And I can't recall the issue right now that it was about, but it was, a member of the bureaucracy said, well, if we do that, they'll say that we have no sense of humor. Now that is to them, I'm generalizing, because I had another experience with somebody else from the Archdiocese, and he was outraged and indignant. So it varies from person to person. But it would seem that the idea that somebody would say you have no sense of humor, Father, makes them run for cover. They're afraid of what the secular world is going to say to them.
In the old days, the martyrs went to their martyrdom in the arena, and today they're afraid of an editorial in the New York Times.
That's it. Now, something that hasn't been brought out, and that is this, that as far as dignity is concerned, in 1983, and this is common knowledge, this is known by the Archdiocese, no question about it, and has been since it took place. They voted in a vote which took place in the Lesbian and Gay New York Coalition to include an organization called the North American Man-Boy Love Association.
Well, that's the notorious NAMBLA we keep hearing about.
Exactly.
Tell us something about this organization, Paul.
Well, their motto is if they're 8, it's too late. In other words, they're interested in children having sexual relations with children under the years of 8 years old.
You know, for fear that they may think you're making this up, or, that it's too horrendous to be believable, I could quote their own words, and I'm going to do that. I'll read this from The Wanderer, which is probably the only journal in the country that has the guts and the integrity to tell the story as it's really unfolding. And this is what they say. Just bear with me for a moment till I find this thing. He said here, this is The Native from one of their leading journals, and he said, this gentleman said, I believe a 5-year-old child is absolutely capable of deciding and acting upon his own sexual preferences. Walter Hamilton, NAMBLA supporter and former steering committee member, told the New York Daily News, and if the 5-year-old child wants to get involved in a situation with an older man, it's fine with me. Boston activist Charlie Shibley told the 7th NAMBLA conference in 1983 that NAMBLA exists, quote, to attack the presupposition that parents have an hereditary right to their children, that parents have a right to their children, as we do not have. Now, what do you think of that statement?
Well, I'll tell you.
They're saying in so many words that they have as much right to your child and the disposition of your child's life as you do as a parent.
Right.
It's incredible. Don't you find this unbelievable?
Yeah, it's...
It flies in the face of all that is real, all that is common sense, all that is decent.
Right.
Well, I tell you, Joe, there's, John Ruskin wrote about over 100 years ago, he said, we are witnessing the beginning of a strange dissolution of natural affections. And
What does the scriptures speak of?
and he made the comment based upon the fact that in England at that time, people were moving out of their ancestral homes into the tenements in London that they were building. And he thought this was a bad sign. He was a prophet, but I don't think the Ruskin could have foreseen a parade of 50,000 sexual perverts marching down Fifth Avenue, led by the mayor, who proclaimed Sexual Perversion Week, or what he called Gay Pride Week, and with a review of this parade from the steps of St. Patrick's Cathedral, and with a banner 30 feet long hung across the front door of the cathedral saying, "God is gay." This was in 1980.
That's when you got arrested?
No, I got arrested in there in 1981. I didn't hear about it. I had a Orthodox Jewish friend who told me.
You got arrested?
In 1981.
What happened there?
Well, I
Occasioned your arrest?
had an Orthodox Jewish friend who told me about this and about the banner. I found it hard to believe. I went over next year in 1981 along with a friend of mine, Herb McKay. He's a fire captain. And sure enough, they were all on the steps. They had
St. Pat's.
St. Patrick's. They had about 20 or 30 signs up there, but there was nothing on the door itself this year because I had spoken to the Vicar General about it. Apparently, the Vicar General, I assume, gave orders that nothing was to be put on the cathedral itself because they did not. Nevertheless, they were there en masse and they had all kinds of signs and banners, including banners that said gay is good and God is gay, and nowhere does man come so close to man as in man. This was a paraphrase of scripture. And
What about the crucifix upside down in the garbage can?
that's another thing. In this parade,
Crucifix upside down
yes,
in
in
the
this
garbage
parade,
can?
they had many blasphemous signs and banners, and obscene signs and banners. One of the worst, or I think the worst, was the fact that they pushed a sanitation department type of trash can with wheels on it. On the trash can it said Bible Depository, and sticking out of it was a crucifix. This is a type of insults that they give to Christians and Catholics, and this supposedly in this parade honored by the presence of the mayor of New York, Edward Koch, and given a permit by the city of New York. This parade, group after group would stop in front of the cathedral and chant things like "Burn it down, Jesus kills, Jesus kills." They would chant 2, 4, 6, 8. How do you know the Pope is straight? So on and so forth.
Oh, my goodness.
And they were allowed to do this all afternoon. And
Did
they,
Dignity march in this parade?
Dignity did march in this parade.
As
They
Catholics?
were on the steps?
They were on the steps, and they were
They cheered it on from
they,
the steps?
They cheered it on from the steps.
So how can they condone such action if they call themselves Catholics?
Well, it is
There's a contradiction here.
a charade.
Yeah.
And the fact, though, that so many Catholic bishops have given them recognition for this diabolical charade
It is diabolical.
indicates that, as Pope Paul VI said, the smoke of hell has entered the sanctuary of the church itself. People, Catholics, I was standing there on the steps in 1981. I believe she was a French woman. It sounded like she had a French accent. She says, "What is this? What's going on here?" I told her.
She couldn't understand.
She says, "I can't believe this." She says, "My country is supposed to be decadent," she says. "We would never allow this in my country."
Well, it was Chesterton who said 60 years ago that the next big crisis in the world will be a crisis of morality, and it will not come from Moscow, but it will come from Manhattan.
Manhattan. He didn't say New York, he said Manhattan.
Isn't it strange that the atheistic nations of the world would never allow something like this? You won't allow homosexuals to teach in the schools. They certainly will allow them to march in parades. So
We've
there's
got
an
a-
irony here that's almost...
We have a governor, Mario
Yeah.
Cuomo, who insists that you have homosexual teachers teaching our children. When I was in court last week with the Gay Veterans Association, it was a teacher who was on the stand against me. This is somebody who could have been teaching my own children.
Yeah, they say, look, I think you people are becoming unduly alarmed. We don't want your children. This idea that we're child molesters is a travesty on our reputation. We respect children. We don't want your children. But out of their mouths again, they betray themselves. Let me read this on the Wanderer. This is from Mr. Larry Bush. Defensive activists, wrote Larry Bush, a syndicated columnist who was arguably homosexualism's leading national commentator, fearful of child molester stereotypes, has fostered the myth that we have no interest in children. Now, this is the Ringer. On the contrary, we are ever to consider ourselves successful in making society responsive to the realities of our lives. We must be able to talk to children about our lives and about their lives. So what they're saying in so many words is they want to be part of the formation of your child and mine.
Well, Dignity has a youth outreach program, they call it. I mean, what is this?
Exactly that.
But they can't reproduce themselves.
No, but they can,
homosexual act
yeah,
cannot
their
reproduce itself.
reproduction is recruitment, isn't it?
Of course, it has to recruit it. Who are they going to recruit? They're going to recruit your children.
Well, I think one of the sickest things I saw in that parade was a lesbian group, and marching at the head of it was a little 5-year-old girl. And
A 5-year-old girl?
who did not know what it was all about. And around her neck they had a sign saying Dyke Tyke.
What?
Dyke Tyke.
Dyke is
5-year-old
is
child,
slang for
6-year-old
lesbian.
child, yeah.
Poor child. You didn't know what she was carrying.
And in front of her was the woman who was topless.
What?
Oh yes, topless.
I have pictures here, but it's not fit for of the parade, but they're not fit. Some of them for public showing.
I don't think that most of us
Some of them
know.
carried
Yeah.
signs, Joe, that had words you wouldn't even hear in an army barracks. 20-foot banners with just one word on, indicating some kind of a sexual act.
20-foot banner.
Right in front of the cathedral. Right.
I
And
don't
they didn't
know.
get arrested yet. I spray paint a ribbon on the gay veterans wreath,
And you get hauled
and
in.
I get hauled in.
And I'll tell you,
I could be in the cooler right
this,
now.
by the way, is the parade that the mayor of New York leads.
This is incredible.
You know,
They're turning our own institutions against us.
absolutely.
Ed
But
Koch and Mario Cuomo are like this with the homosexual
they
network.
make no
Why?
words about
Why? Because they can get the vote.
Because they know politically they're very powerful.
Yeah, they can make or break any candidate.
They
For
can
office.
indeed. They can zero in on any candidate and get rid of him. Why? Because they got manpower. They
Well,
don't have children. They got plenty of money.
They're
and
educated.
They're educated.
They're
Well
articulate,
educated. Their unemployment rate is practically zero. Except now, of course, they were coming out with AIDS, so that's a little.
They're 94%
Well, I think you
employed
left
by
out
the
the
last
most
figures.
important thing, and the most important thing is the indifference and apathy of the average normal person.
You know, I don't think it's apathy so much.
80% of Catholics voted for this man, Ed Koch, in New York.
80%?
80%. He got 80% of the Catholic vote. Yet, he has been waging war against the Catholic Church. He went after, who has the house for kids down there?
Father Ritter.
Father Ritter.
Father Ritter,
Bruce
he's trying to
Ritter,
shut
right.
him down. He's been trying to shut down, to force Catholic
He wanted to
organizations-
shut down Father Ritter's
Yes.
house on the
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, giving him a hard time.
And he leads this parade. He promotes sexual perversion. He's a man who,
But here again, the
And
responsibility has to be laid on the doorstep of
and
the
yet
church.
he gets 80% of the Catholic vote.
Why?
And so why do politicians fear the homosexuals? Because they vote as a black. But Catholics do not. And also homosexuals are aware of their interests.
Catholics are political pygmies.
They're political pygmies, and they don't really care about the moral issues. They care only about basically their pocketbook, maybe. And the politicians sense that. Until there's a sense of moral dignity and in Catholic people, they will not be taken seriously by the politicians, whereas groups like this will. And the only way that they can get back their moral character again, is if the bishops lead them.
The pulpit is the answer.
Yep.
The pulpit,
You know what Christ said? He says, when the salt loses its savor, it's not good for anything except to be cast on the earth and trod down by men.
We see it happening now.
For the Catholic
It's
people.
happening right now. We're becoming a mockery, a joke. Look, they're not going to go away. They're organized, they have their own agenda, and they mean to win, and they mean to prevail. You know, man proposes and God disposes. And we're living, I think, on the verge of a plague.
Yes.
With all that we've spoken about this evening, I think we should touch upon this question of AIDS. Now, Paul, you were deeply involved in this, weren't you?
well, I do have an organization, the National Coalition to Prevent the Spread of AIDS, so I am deeply involved with keeping up to date on what's developing on the AIDS front. And it is a very frightening phenomenon. In the United States, it would seem from the information I have available to me that it was introduced into the United States via Haiti, and the homosexuals going down there for vacations and bringing it back to New York, Los Angeles, and San Francisco, and Miami, where predominantly, now it would seem that it got underway in the late 70s. Of course, it is a latent disease, which usually does not manifest itself until anything up to 5 years.
It's a lengthy virus. It's a slow developing disease.
It's a slow retroviral mutating infection, infectious disease, which doesn't manifest itself anything between 3 and 20 years, in fact, to show up.
Well, is it a homosexual disease?
No, it's not per se a homosexual disease, but in the United States, the homosexual community, it would seem from the information that's available, were responsible for introducing it and spreading it in the 4 major centers that I outlined. And it's only now that through the fact that 80% of homosexuals actually are bisexual, that the magic figure of 10% of the population is supposed to be homosexual is not actually correct. 2% of the population is homosexual and 8% are bisexual. And in there lies the problem as far as the rest of heterosexual community is concerned, because somebody...
They're crossing over.
Well, they're swinging both ways, is what they're doing. They're having sex with a man one time, and then maybe passing it on to the man. A husband could pass it on to his wife.
To the children.
And from there, if she happens to get pregnant, the chances are that she'll pass it on to the child. Casual contact, as far as AIDS is concerned, is a hotly debated subject right now. And I'd rather not even discuss that. The fact is that it can be spread through homosexual sex. They know now it can be spread through heterosexual sex, both on the man to the woman and the woman to the man. So it's a very big problem, and it's a problem that all of us have now got to face the reality of this. That sex outside marriage simply is not practical.
You're playing Russian roulette?
And you're playing Russian roulette, and whenever Koop, the Surgeon General, comes out with the idea of, safe sex and condoms for everybody, I mean, it's absolutely farcical. I got some information in the mail today on the condom. I mean, the condom in regular sex can be anything up to 50% ineffective, and we're talking about prevention of conception.
Well, I saw something the other day. It said the only safe sex is conversation. That's true.
Conversation. Right.
But you see,
ironic,
how far down the road we've come when a major official of our government is telling people to go out and sin, possibly with impunity.
Yep.
You can sin as long as you don't catch a disease. Is that what he's saying to
not only
the
that,
country at large?
they want to give contraceptives to even children.
At what age?
Well, it may vary from locale to locale, but they're talking about from the age of puberty, seventh graders.
Yeah, this is crazy. This is absolutely crazy.
And it wasn't so long ago that anybody that would suggest now what the Surgeon General of the United States is suggesting would have been arrested for trying to impair the morals of minors.
Right.
And, you know, I really think if we were in a sane society, that man would be put under arrest and tried on a national scale to impair the morals of minors.
Well, I heard today that the White House now has told Everett Koop that any public statements he makes, he has to run it through the White House first. That any public statements he makes as a private citizen. Off-the-cuff statements are his as a private citizen from now on. So they're keeping their eyes on him. I spoke with Henry Hyde only 2 days ago.
But the damage has been done to a very great extent, hasn't it?
Yes, it has.
On a late day.
And the real disappointing thing is that there were a lot of strings were pulled in Washington to get Everett Koop the job as Surgeon General. And he has really disappointed the conservative people who got him the job.
Well, he was supposed to be an evangelical Christian, wasn't he?
Well, he supposedly was very pro-life and what have you, and he's concerned himself practically 99% with to eradicate smoking, if you please. I mean, here we have a disease which is deadly, incurable, can annihilate every man, woman, and child on the face of the earth, and this man is worried about cigar smoke. I mean, come on, let's get our priorities in order here.
That's unbelievable.
I'll tell you what's ironic, Joe, is the fact that
If it wasn't so serious, it'd be laughable, you know?
Yeah, it would, yeah.
Yeah, a real joke.
that the agent for the transmission of life has now become the agent for the transmission of death.
That's well put, Andy.
And it's because of the abuse and misuse of this agency. Sex became a plaything. And then from a plaything, it became used for unnatural purposes. Samuel Johnson said that his famous line, they have milked the cow dry, and now with the pail in hand, they're merrily up to milk the bull. We seem to have become jaded sexually, and now there's been an outbreak of unnatural sex. And after this outbreak of unnatural sex, St. Paul said the wages of sin is death, and that is now what the society is paying for. An interesting thing about, a number of months ago, one of the epistles of St. Paul mentioned how back in that day, or in his day, 2,000 years ago almost, he said because of their rejection of God, their pride and their rejection of God, that that people had become unnatural in their outlook, and men were sleeping with men and women with women.
He abandoned them to the reprobate mind.
It's interesting that he linked this with the rise of atheism, the denial of God. And to me, it's interesting that in the 60s, we said God is dead. We were a proud society. We were affluent. We didn't need God anymore. God was dead. And in the end of the 70s and the beginning of the 80s, this outbreak of homosexuality occurred.
The tree is bearing fruit, isn't it?
And there seems to be some kind of a relationship, metaphysical, between atheism and the denial of God and unnatural.
There is a metaphysical and a philosophical relationship. This didn't happen in a day. It took a period of time. I think the root problem here is secular humanism. When you say that man is the measure of all things, sexuality included, why then any kind of combinations become possible.
Yep.
That's right, and if you consider the mindset of the homosexual, sexual mindset of him, it's very sort of, it's almost sort of a very immature outlook he has on life, because he's looking for the easy way out. He's looking for sex when he wants it on his terms.
No responsibility.
No responsibility, no children, no financial involvement. If he's living with another man, they've got 2 incomes coming in. They can go on vacations whenever they want. There are certain amount of attraction in a secular society that we live in for that type of lifestyle, and for certain type of weak-minded, no-character type individual. I worked for a company a couple of years ago where the owner of the company, she was on her third marriage. Her second marriage had failed because her husband had taken off with another woman. No, with another man, if you please.
Incredible.
With another man, but right out of the blue. I mean, she had no idea that he was swung both ways. He was bisexual, and he got bought out, apparently. The man said, don't worry about it, I'll take care of everything financially, and he just left the family.
Well, you know, Joe, that passage I was citing of St. Paul, he also went on to say that because of these unnatural vices, that they had come down with some kind of an illness. He said their body was paying a penalty or something like that. It was the way that he put it, and he said, which they have well merited. Then he went on to say, to indicate that this disease or whatever it was, we don't know whether it was AIDS or some other kind of
Probably
venereal
something like a venereal disease of a kind.
was spreading to other people, and he said, which they also have merited because of their toleration of this vice. So
We have a high tolerance in this country.
we have a high tolerance. Now it's spreading, we hear, to the word innocent people, and they may be innocent on an individual basis, but the society is not innocent. The society has tolerated this and many other forms of depravity in the last 30 years.
The guilt has touched all of us one way or another.
Right, and
Silence is always tacit endorsement.
yeah, and so it would appear that if society really wants to address the issue, society should look at itself and its moral decay. You know, we have tolerated things now. There are 2 million children in America today who are abandoned or lost or missing.
2 million.
2 million. Now, this is an unnatural society where there are 2 million kids who have left home or been kidnapped or run away or whatever.
Well, everything we've been talking about this evening is only a description of an ongoing destruction of the family as we know it, as God had designed it to be. How can you possibly raise a family in this kind of an environment and do the job correctly? Gentlemen, we've reached the first half of our journey. We will now take a short intermission, and we'll be back with more about the Catholic Church and the Homosexual Network. See you shortly. Greetings and welcome to the second half of Catholic Update. Our guests are Paul Morrissey and Andrew McCauley. The subject, the Catholic Church and the Homosexual Network. Gentlemen, we've described quite a mess here. We're in trouble. And you, good gentlemen, have been in this battle for a long time. You've been on the firing line. What can we do? And things have to be done and done quickly. Let's start with you, Andy. How have you handled this situation?
There are 2 areas, I think, of action. One is prayer.
Always prayer.
And I think the key to that was given to us at Fatima,
Yes.
1917, the Rosary. And anyone can do that. The other is action. And it should be action that is significant and intelligent. There is not, I don't believe that you should wear out the troops in doing things just for the sake of protesting.
Needless action.
We don't have enough troops on the front today as it is, and you see the same people at a Right to Life picketing, at an anti-sacrilege demonstration. It's the same people. What we need is to get all Catholics out.
How about the young people?
And the young people, especially. That's very true, Joe, because they have been conspicuously absent in all these demonstrations, at least among Catholics. For instance, we protested the Life of Brian when that first was shown.
The movie, The Life of Brian, right?
The movie, The Life of Brian?
Yes, it was a sacrilegious movie. It was a parody of the life of Christ, and an especially sacrilegious and blasphemous portrayal of the crucifixion itself. And
When in time, where would you place this? When did this happen?
this was about 1979, I would say. And we turned out 750 people, which is a lot of Catholics to turn out.
It certainly is.
And we demonstrated in front of Warner Brothers building in Rockefeller Center. Then we marched to a movie house across town and demonstrated there. It was mainly a Catholic group, although there were some Orthodox Jews who were even there, as well as some Protestants. And but there were very few young people. Now, I've been involved in this kind of activity for a long time, and I have contacted, for instance, Newman clubs. You cannot get them out. I called up the chaplain at one college in New York, and he was sympathetic, but he says, frankly, he says, I don't believe we can turn out very many people. I don't think they turn out any. The problem here is I don't think that the young people are getting imbued with Catholic doctrine, with the history of the church in a proper way, or with the romance of the church and the Christian civilization.
They don't know their magnificent heritage.
They don't know their heritage. That's right, exactly. And as a result, they're indifferent to these
They're easy
things.
prey.
They're easy prey. They're indifferent to these insults to their faith and their heritage. And I think it's important to get the young people, and I say one of the ways this can be done is to introduce them to G.K. Chesterton, college people.
He's enjoying a revival right now, isn't
He
he?
is. People don't realize the effect that he has on the minds of young people. He's almost, young people who I would say 19, 20, 21 or 22, who read Chesterton have described the experience as something like a psychedelic event, like a drug. He has such an impact on the mind at this age.
Perhaps his time has come.
And I think that he is a major weapon that the church should use. But
If I can just interject something here, that as far as my committee, Morality Action Committee, is concerned, I started it off on a local sort of grassroots level.
You've been on the firing line a lot of years, Paul. You go back, what, 10 years?
Yes.
In the game?
Well, 1977 Morality Action Committee was formed. I was involved before that, sort of on a part-time basis with other people. Pretty well under the wing of Mr. MCCAULEY here, who gave me a lot of pointers and, sort of led me along. I never read Chesterton, I might add, but I did form Morality Action Committee, and really what it was just a group of housewives in Glendale, Queens, where once a month we would sit down and we would start with the rosary.
Don't underestimate the power of a housewife.
No.
no, the rosary.
Or the rosary.
No, the rosary, right. But we did start every meeting with the rosary, and I found that to be very important, because later on we were infiltrated and we dropped the rosary, and the
You were
committee,
infiltrated?
we were infiltrated, yes, by the, you have to watch that,
That
A
happened.
lot of cloak and dagger stuff here, yes, but it really...
Daring do.
Because as soon as you start becoming effective, the enemy seek you out, there's no doubt about it. I don't want to put anybody off out there who's thinking of getting involved in this. As far as getting dignity out of your local diocese, that type of committee, a small committee starting off, meeting once a month, starting with letter writing to the Archdiocese, with follow-up with phone calls, with copies to the Vatican, to Cardinal Ratzinger, who of course came out with his pronouncement against organizations.
Paul,
such
we
as
have to stress
Dignity.
here that those letters are read, and those letters are taken into account. The letters that go to Rome.
Yes, indeed. Letters that go to Rome, copies are often sent back to the Apostolic Delegate in Washington, Pierre Laghi, and then the local bishop is informed via Washington. So
Okay, that's one thing we can do then, write letters to Rome.
write letters to Rome and write
Addressed
letters...
to Ratzinger?
Yes.
Cardinal Ratzinger?
You have to do your homework, however, to begin with. First of all, you have to contact, as far as, let's take the Dignity, for example, right, because we've been discussing
You had a
that.
victory there.
We did have a victory, and although it took quite a long time, we were letter writing several years ago on this. We had quite a decent letter writing campaign. We got to Rome and we got to the diocese. We found our strongest weapon, of course, was the Ratzinger letter condemning organizations which use church facilities.
Let's dwell on that a bit now. What exactly did the letter say, and what did it do?
Well, I've got it in my bag here. I can put it out.
Well, generally speaking, enlighten us a bit.
Actually, we started a letter writing campaign in January of I think 85, and we started another campaign again in 1986. I think in the fall, early fall of 1986, and then shortly thereafterwards, a month or two thereafterwards, the Ratzinger report came from Rome. I might add that we told our people to write to Cardinal Ratzinger. It's important that they write to someone over there who is known to take action and who is sympathetic towards the traditional Orthodox Catholic views. Ratzinger was one. We put I think 2 other cardinals on the list, but we headed it with Cardinal Ratzinger.
Kenya and
well, this is a major victory.
And as a matter of fact,
because what the church is saying here is we're reaffirming what we've always believed.
Oh yes,
that homosexuality is a sin, and it cannot be engendered or condoned or encouraged on church premises. Isn't that the general thrust of the letter?
Well, here it is, quote, right, all support should be withdrawn from any organization which seeks to undermine the teaching of the church, which are ambiguous about it, or which neglect it entirely. Such support, or even the semblance of such support, can be greatly misinterpreted. So that's really the key paragraph in the whole thing.
I must say we've had a number of successes.
Let's hear about the wins.
All right, okay.
We've been talking gloom and doom for
We started the whole campaign against the life of Brian.
Okay.
Our picketing of Warner Brothers and of the movie house got national publicity as well as international notice. As a result, the film was banned in certain countries like Norway. In certain states it was banned, like in South Carolina. Certain towns and cities it was banned. I think they expected that film to probably gross 50 or 60 million. It ended up with, I think, something like 13, 14, 15.
They lost money.
Well, they just about broke even.
That means they lost money.
Yes. And
they understand that kind of language.
Yeah,
we have in the pocketbook.
Now everybody said you're only going to give them publicity. Don't do it. After a while, they were crying that this is not meant to be blasphemous, and they were trying to alibi. It was hurting them.
Put them on the defense.
Even if it gave them publicity, I think this kind of a thing, this kind of insult, cannot be allowed to pass. It should be protested.
Right.
But however,
the insult was flung at the church. It should be addressed publicly.
And at Christ,
our Lord Jesus. Right.
And I think it hurt him badly, and it caused a nationwide campaign against a Mary Whitehead in England. Began a campaign. It was condemned by the leaders of practically all the major churches in the world. It was condemned by Rabbi Abraham Heck as a vicious insult against religion itself. And Rabbi Heck is the head of the union, I believe it's of Orthodox rabbis in America.
Well, in fact, Rabbi Levin came out in support of this great protest we organized in New York in the Hail Mary movie.
Right.
The Hail Mary movie, yes.
So men of goodwill of all faiths begin to realize that if they don't hang together, they're going to hang separately.
Right.
Yes,
that was just one success.
Let's hear some more.
Well, this Hail Mary was a classic example. I mean,
we won that one. Yeah, we won.
8,000 Catholic demonstrators in New York City, in Lincoln Center, protesting.
I saw you there, Paul.
That was a joint effort by many groups, including the Catholic League for Religious and Civil Liberties, did a very nice job in that. We also had success against National Lampoon magazine. They have been running for many years.
That's a rough magazine.
For many years, they have been running sacrilegious and blasphemous articles. about, for instance, Christ as a homosexual.
See, they keep dredging that bromide up from time to time.
And incest in the Holy Family. All this, I mean, it was as vile as you can imagine.
Incredible.
Well, there are certain states that have anti-blasphemy laws. And I went first to New Jersey and filed a criminal complaint against National Lampoon. And we didn't have success because the DA who presented the case to the grand jury after I left the room said that the case had to be dropped because I did not buy the issues in New Jersey, the magazines in New Jersey. I had bought them in New Jersey. I testified that they had bought them in New Jersey. The grand jury, it was the end of the day, 5 o'clock, they were sitting all day on a murder indictment. They didn't listen to what I said, apparently. They listened to what he said, and they didn't, so they voted no bill or no indictment. The DA, was very, the head,
Well, it should be pointed out,
very unhappy about that.
It should be pointed out, you are a lawyer.
Yes, right.
Right.
He was very unhappy about that, but he said nothing could be done about it, except that the assistant DA who presented that case was shortly thereafter left his position. I then went to Boston, and again I filed a complaint against not only National Lampoon, but against the editor, or against the publisher and owner. And the penalty in Massachusetts was up to a year in jail. And at that point, they said, look, we'll editorially agree to discontinue these kind of articles.
And did they?
And they did. They put the editorial in, and they have not run these kind of articles since.
Another major victory.
That was, I think, a major victory.
But I think
we should take a page from the book of our enemies, the ACLU. I mean, they're great on litigation, and they're quietly working a revolution in this country. And if there's ever going to be a counter-revolution, one of the places we will meet these people is in the courts.
Well, what you can't only rely upon the courts, particularly. I mean, he did this about 10, 15 years ago. You got to remember.
I know what you're saying.
Okay. Now the complex of the courts is somewhat different, particularly in New York, where you've got a very liberal court system there, which has a mindset against our type of thinking. So one of the things Andy did was go after the advertisers of National Lampoon. And he actually knocked out 90% of them. They practically went out of business.
90% of the major ones. They have a lot of
the
small
major
ones.
small ones, it doesn't matter.
Put them in the pocketbook. It's the language they understand.
They complained that we cost them millions of dollars in advertising. And they said, 1, we don't want to go to jail. 2, we have lost, in the editorial they said $1 million, but to me they said I cost them.
So they really felt the effects of the
well, of the 37 major advertisers, after we started our campaign, which was assisted by the KFC, they were reduced to 13 major advertisers from 37.
That's great.
And this item, and it just shows what can be done.
So things that can be done here. In other words, all is not hopeless.
What we did is we
we
sent copies, or we photostated some of the most vile things that were in the magazine to the home address of the chairman of the boards and the presidents of the companies who were advertising. Because we figured we sent it to their office, it would go to some clerk and then throw it in the wastepaper basket. So there are things you can do. The problem today is I think that people have a sense of inevitability, that you can't do anything.
You can't.
The reason why things are good is because everybody has that attitude.
They throw their hands up in despair and say it's all over. Well, that's not true, is it?
No, they figure it can't be me, I can't do something. Well, they can do something. You'd be surprised what you can do if you try, you know?
And we were discussing this earlier, Paul. Everyone can make a contribution at any given level with the talents that God has given them.
They can contact, for example, the Catholic Center in New York, which is run by Father Rueda, and they can organize a local conference, a leadership conference in their own neighborhood, and find out the do's and don'ts of just how to go about Catholic action. You know, get yourself organized with your own committee locally and do the work that has to be done. I mean, we're living in the age of the laity now.
You know,
The laity have to realize that you have to get involved personally, make a commitment to get involved personally. Until you do that, the problems are not going to be solved, they're not going to go away, and it's our responsibility to do that.
But you said, Paul, to become informed, and I think you said the same thing, Andy. Good place to start, by the way, is with Father Rader's book, The Homosexual Network. This is a compendium of this phenomenon we call the homosexual network. It's a reference book that's mind-boggling. If you really want to know what's going on, we urge you to get a copy of that book.
Must reading in this particular situation. As far as Morality Action Committee involvement right now and the people out there who are watching this, if you want to get involved locally and get dignity out of your area.
By the way, how many chapters of dignity are there in the dioceses across the country?
Anything up to 120 is the latest figure I've got.
That's incredible.
Now, reading in the Catholic media right now, I understand maybe 7 chapters have already been debunked. Now, it was November. That Ratziger's letter was published in November, and we're now late March. Now, it's almost 5 months has rolled by.
Dragging their feet, aren't they?
Well, they're not exactly rushing into this. I mean, if this is the rate, we're going to get rid of 10 dignity chapters a year. They're going to be around for the next 10 years. So we've got lots of work to do here. And if
Well, you got something done in New York. How'd you do that?
Well, we just pressured constantly. So to begin with, we started a letter writing campaign. We started phone calls into the archdiocese. We started phone calls and letters into the Jesuits. We CC'd Rome and the Apostolic Delegate in Washington. When we were getting the problem we had in New York, and this is a problem you very well may find in your own diocese, is that a organization, well, in this case the Jesuits, the Dignity Mass was held in the Jesuit Church.
St. Xavier's,
St. Francis Xavier in Manhattan. Now, the problem there is that the Jesuits, as it were, ran that parish. They gave the directions to that parish. The jurisdiction was with the archdiocese. However, the archdiocese prefers to work through the Jesuits. And so we were getting tossed back and forth between the Jesuits and the archdiocese. Oh, well, don't talk to us, talk to the Jesuits. The Jesuits would say, well, don't talk to us, talk to... Until we were getting back and forth,
Passing the buck, huh?
Passing the buck. So we said, okay, look, we're going to have a demonstration outside the church. You know, we're getting messed around here. We're having a demonstration outside the church, and we'll bring this to the attention of the media, right? So that's what we did. Well, that's what we did. We had a demonstration. The media ignored it, actually, as it so turned out. You can't always win on demonstrations in Manhattan. You got to know how to play the media. It was a Saturday night. Weekends are never good. However, that's when the Mass was, on Saturday night at 7 o'clock. We had a very impressive demonstration. We had over 100 people.
Is this Mass attended exclusively by homosexuals?
Anything up to 400 dignity members in St. Francis Xavier, one of the most splendid architectural edifices in the Catholic Church, by the way. This is a magnificent cathedral, I would say, Francis Xavier. The internal...
That's the ultimate blasphemy, isn't it?
Yeah, well, of course it is.
Yeah, the ultimate blasphemy, though, is not the fact that it merely takes place in the church and the altar is used, but that the body and blood of Christ is used. And one thing that I don't think even Rome has addressed yet is the fact that they're going to go underground now. They're going to go into private homes or maybe non-Catholic buildings and churches, and they're going to have the host consecrated by priests there in this unholy rite. And I really think that Rome and the bishops, I don't know why the bishops always got to wait for Rome to say do this, must say that any priest who does this, who celebrates Mass sponsored by a group that sponsors or advocates sodomy, will be defrocked. Because it's
Ipso facto excommunicated.
right, and that's excommunicated.
Well, they started with John McNeil, and they should continue doing it.
It's interesting that when we met with the Jesuits,
Is he excommunicated at this point?
No.
No, I don't believe so.
No, but he has been voted out of... No, he's out of the Jesuits. He's appealing, but he's appealing to the people who threw him out. So,
Was he told to cease and desist from discussing sexuality?
Yes.
he's no longer a priest.
Thereof publicly?
Defrocked.
Yeah. And yet he appeared on the Phil Donahue show dressed in his priestly...
I don't
No,
think
he wasn't.
Well, I don't think he's been
Priestly,
defrocked yet. He's been kicked out of the federal order, but not defrocked. When we met with the pastor down at St. Francis Xavier and the assistant pastor and the parish council, we asked the pastor, Father Donahue, would you allow a mass to be sponsored by the Ku Klux Klan? He said, no. Why not? He said, well, because that's evil. They're evil. Well, obviously, from their attitude and the response to this question, he does not consider
Homosexuality evil.
sodomy an evil, sexual perversion an evil.
And they're redefining morality.
That's exactly what they're doing, and that's exactly what they say they want to do in their own...
in the name of the church.
Right?
Right, in the name of the church. I have
Gentlemen,
from the same dignity calendar here, Bill. Let me read this to you. This is from Dignity newsletter again, June 1984. They say on the front page here, one of the first things that a gay Christian must do is reconcile her religious convictions with his homosexuality. In doing that, the homosexual comes to realize that the answers of society and the church with regard to sexuality are not adequate and are, in fact, false. To use a hackneyed phrase, gay is good, so on and so forth. Then they say that what Dignity must do is to confront and rise up from and challenge the traditional answers offered by society and the church. Dignity can be the place and space for the development of a new theology.
A new theology.
Yes.
In other words, the church has been in error for
Yes.
2,000
And not
years.
just on
Is that what they're
this
saying?
issue. They say if society and the church were wrong on sexuality, as they say, could they also be wrong in other ways and concerning other issues, including the most fundamental of these, the meaning of life, the meaning of the human person, the meaning of Christianity itself. In other
How
words,
about adultery, fornication, murder, rape?
everything. What they're saying here is that the church is wrong on the issue of homosexuality and sodomy, and therefore it is probably wrong in everything else, and they say that we want to establish a new theology. What they're saying is an entirely new religion, satanic religion, really.
What they're saying is that they wish to destroy the church and set up our Lord Jesus Christ.
Right.
Well, as an example, I attended their masses occasionally in Xavier just to infiltrate and see what was going on there. And one of the things that they had during the mass was that, as you do in all masses, it's the section, I've forgotten the name of it, but no, it's not the Kiss of Peace. It's where you pray for people, if your intentions, and people would shout out in the church, please pray for John Smith, who recently died, and please pray for me and my lover, for example.
This goes on during a mass?
During the mass, yes.
In front of the tabernacle?
In front of the tabernacle, yes. Another quote from the newsletter of Dignity was this in October '85, where Dignity calls, this is a quote, to those trying to lead healthy and holy lives. Sounds great, doesn't it? Here's the kicker. As sexually active gays and lesbians. In other words, they're trying to make a sacrament out of the homosexual sexual act. And once they can do that, of course, they legitimize, they pave the way for homosexual marriages. And once the person is married, of course, then naturally you can adopt children. And so there they have their recruitment. So they don't have to reproduce their own. They simply get married, quote unquote, and adopt.
And raise these children up in their own image and their own conviction.
Right. And if you read Masters and Johnson or Kinsey, you will find out that homosexual people have a proclivity towards sex with children, about 5 to 1 from.
Well, they deny this vehemently.
They deny.
Out of their own mouths, they condemn themselves.
Okay, what they use, Joe, is this, and Donahue said this the other day, and I had to correct him on the show on Friday. He said that there are more homosexual pedophiles, or child molesters, than there are heterosexual. And strictly, I beg your pardon, there are more heterosexual child molesters than there are homosexual. And strictly, he's correct. However, it so happens that heterosexuals outnumber homosexuals 9 to 1. You would expect there to be numerically more, but in fact, homosexuals are far more prone to sex with children than regular heterosexual people are. Between 5 and 6 to 1 it is.
Well, it becomes a very silly exchange. You're taking head counts. The fact remains is that an activity, what they really want, when you think about it, the homosexual community, is acceptance.
That's right.
They want us to say to them, yes, what you're doing is only another human variant of the sexual experience of human beings, a legitimate lifestyle, another option. And more than that, not only do they want us to accept it, they want to make it the highest form of human love and expression known to man. And they wish to convey this philosophy, this agenda, this diabolical way of looking at things to our children.
And that's the right word, Joe, diabolical. Dante, the poet Dante, one time wrote that that there is in the modern in these kind of attitudes, there is that aspect that runs contrary to nature that you find in all the religions of the demons. In other words, Satan worship does everything backwards. They say the prayers backwards. They have
Total inversion.
total inversion, and this has always been a ritual of black magic and Satan worship. And what the homosexuals are doing is trying to reverse sex. It has all the earmarks of Satan itself, of doing things backwards, upside down, inside out. Mm-hmm. And it is a great monstrous joke by Satan to degrade people.
They're redefining reality, which is impossible.
And death instead of life. You have it with the AIDS crisis.
Yes,
right away.
And but I'll tell you, it's not so impossible you can't actually redefine reality, but you can fool enough people as to what constitutes reality that you can control society and turn it upside down and inside out, because it's my opinion that the American people in the last 30 years have lost contact with reality. With moral reality, with psychological reality, with their very own roots and with their own failings. I'll give you an example. There was a movement 10 years ago to get in touch with yourself. And part of this was, and now it's become a cult, group therapy and all this kind of thing. And the modus operandi of it was to touch other people in order to feel some emotion towards them. And they would all, in these group encounters, would get together and embrace and touch and all this kind of stuff. Now, that was a prelude. Now this is a complete inversion of what should happen. You should feel first and then touch to express the feeling. But they're trying to get the feeling by the touching. You can see in modern man, everything is upside down and inside out and reverse. And this kind of inversion, sexual inversion, the type I just mentioned, is a sign of Satan's dominance within society. This has become a satanic society. The fact that you got 2 million people, 2 million children who are missing in this country, this is incredible. The fact that you got more than that missing,
you've got more than that missing, Andy. You've got 4 million more missing who never see the light of day.
Oh.
Abortion is part of it.
You have
when mothers say that they can destroy their own children and declare it to be a right, a matter of privacy, is there much left after that?
No, there isn't.
I mean,
let's not forget prayer too, because the antidote to Satan is, of course, prayer.
Here again, we've got to reaffirm that the battle is not lost. We've had the promise, time and again from the Blessed Mother, that we will win this battle. In the end, my Immaculate Heart will triumph. She's given us a promise. Which doesn't get us off the hook.
First of all,
we've got to go out, as you say, Paul, we've got to work and we've got to pray, and each to his own abilities and to his own talents, but you've got to do something.
we won the battle 2,000 years ago. We've lost a lot of minor ones since.
But it hasn't stopped.
And, right.
It'll go on till the end of time.
But I think now we are maybe have reached a turning point where we're going to start to win some more battles. Because I really think that AIDS is aptly named.
It's AIDS from heaven.
It's an aid from heaven. It's not a divine punishment, but it's actually an aid.
But how when you say this, that
because
AIDS is a punishment from heaven, they don't want to hear this.
It's going to make us almost force us, without interfering completely with free will, to change our lifestyles. Two, those who do get the disease will have plenty of time to repent.
Right.
And to offer up their pain.
And prayerfully they will.
And hopefully they will, and if I understand, some have. And I really think there's divine providence in this. I think it's aptly named. And one of the things that this country has to get back is its spiritual immune system. It's been destroyed.
It didn't happen overnight, though.
Your spiritual immune system consists of taboos. All of a sudden, to break a taboo since the age of Freud was good, and to honor a taboo was bad. And we broke one taboo after another, until we finally got down to the bottom two. Sacrilege and blasphemy became prevalent in our society, and homosexuality and perversion. The final two taboos, maybe in the third one, incest, which is also prevalent in this.
They're even talking about that now, as if it were a common day occurrence.
And
how long can a civilization endure with this battery?
It all began with the breakup, as you said earlier, Joe, of the family. Divorce was one of the key linchpins to start the breakup. But the attack on the church also, and the failure of the church in this country anyway to respond was another clinical sign that it was an unhealthy body
within the church
within the church and society.
It's still there.
Yeah. But I think it's getting stronger. For one thing, this Pope is taking action. For another thing, the bishops are beginning to stir, I think. For another thing, AIDS has been, so far it's been used almost to justify new evils, like contraception. But nevertheless, there has been a change in lifestyles. People are looking for more monogamous and traditional type of unions.
Just for survival's sake, if nothing else.
Right.
You know, someone wisely said that God forgives always, man sometimes, and nature never.
Right, that's true.
So,
and I think on the subject of condoms, I think we're going to find that public opinion very well may shift on this issue rather quickly, because when you look at statistics on just how ineffective these are, people are fairly quickly going to say, well, just wait a minute, you know, if this doesn't work too good, isn't the message that we're getting to the youngsters that this is the way to go? Isn't that the wrong message? Shouldn't we be telling our youngsters, abstain from sex until you get married? That should be the message. And I think as more and more discussion, and unfortunately it's distasteful, but it's nonetheless necessary, more and more discussion gets underway on this, more and more people will come around to our way of thinking on this, and the idea of condoms simply will go out of the window.
it won't work.
It won't work.
It won't work.
Any form of birth control won't work. We have to embrace humane vitae. It's the only way to go. The pills have got so many side effects. So many women have died from the use of the pill. And IUDs now have been banned in America. They still use them in third world countries, but they're so dangerous. They've killed so many women They've had so many borders come back and kicked us in.
They're still doggedly persistent in their errors.
And they don't want to listen to the
They
law.
were living here with an
Age is
awesome...
just another way of, I think, of humbling this nation. You know the old saying, pride goes before the fall.
We're heading for a fall.
We used to be, well, we've had the fall, I think. We used to be a very proud nation. And
We
now,
stood for something.
yeah, but we believed and we became so arrogant in the 50s, and in the 60s, we actually said God was dead, we could do without God. And since then, the fall has come. Now I think we're from out of the chaos, the disease, the plagues and whatever, hopefully there'll come some humility to this country.
Maybe we'll get on our knees and again start to pray seriously.
And then from humility will come the rise.
Well, that's why we need the best of
We've got to hit bottom before we start going up again.
I think we hopefully we've hit bottom.
But at this moment in time, we're living in an awesome
wouldn't bet on
reality, you know. Never in the history of the world has a plague, and we're in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah.
Plague, if there ever was one, been treated in such a stupid way.
Yeah.
Well, look at New York.
They've taken something which is a public health problem, and they've made it a civil rights issue.
Yeah,
Right.
yes, that's right.
I mean, they've closed one bathhouse, homosexual bathhouses. There's got to be a dozen of them in New York City. They closed one of them, and they made that a big media event. Oh, look, we closed one bathhouse. And it was largely up to Andy and I.
I don't think that most people realize what goes on in these bathhouses, and we can't get explicit because this program goes into families' homes and living
Well,
rooms.
it's a horror story.
Well, let me tell you,
It's just
what they
unbelievable.
were going to do a couple of years ago, they haven't done it yet, the city of New York, Mayor Rick Koch, was going to erect a statue in Sheridan Square in the park down there.
In Sheridan Square?
Right, of two homosexuals, two couples, one male couple and one female, with their hands on their knees or whatever, someplace, in the park. This is during the AIDS plague.
Right.
This is like, can you imagine if during the Black Plague, the mayor says, we're going to have an unveiling of a statue in the town square. And the crowd, the whole town gets there, and then he pulls the veil off the statue, and it's a statue of a rat during the bubonic plague. This is like to erect a statue of homosexuals during the AIDS epidemic is comparable to
They
had a drag ball, if you please, a drag ball.
What is a drag ball?
A drag ball is it's a dance for transvestites, for female impersonators, for men dressed up as women, women dressed up as men, in the Waldorf Astoria, not more than 2 days ago.
It's incredible.
And here we are in the height of the AIDS crisis, and they go and do this. I mean, they are literally flaunting in the face of reality.
And they're not so blind as those who will not
The
see.
thing is that society, that the average person has become so conditioned to these horrors that they accept them now. That's
Right, that's it. Yeah, I mean,
if we have harped on them, it's only because I think we're trying to shock people into saying.
You have to inform them of the problem. And also often, I hope, some solutions to the problem. I mean, one of the solutions we missed, and undoubtedly the most important one, is that a return to sanity, to common sense, to just basic decency has to come from the pulpits of our churches.
Absolutely.
The bishops have to get on the ball. They got to start cracking down on their dioceses. They got to tell their priests to start saying the right things to the people on Sunday mornings. Otherwise, nothing is going to really happen.
And they got to.
The solution lies within the church itself.
And starting with the
If
seminaries.
there is one at all.
Right, and starting with the seminaries. But
And now you're getting to the bedrock of the
Bishop
problem.
Singh said that the church and society will be saved by the
laity.
By the laity. And
Do you think this problem will be addressed in the upcoming?
I think you might say the laity and the Pope.
Yeah.
well, I don't know. I haven't heard too many good things about that up to now.
Well, let's not get into that kind of. We have enough problems already.
But there's
But this Pope knows the problems.
yes,
He's addressing himself to the
addressing
problems.
the problems now.
The problem is, he doesn't have enough people around him to help him.
Yes,
That's the major
yes,
problem.
That is
When you read things about Malachi Martin's book on the Jesuits, it boggles your mind to think that
Yeah.
the Jesuits were once the Pope's men, so loyal
Right.
for 500 years, have become his enemies.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they you can take
And they
a
have a
Pope down.
homosexual mass in
Yeah.
a Jesuit church in New
Well,
York
we
City.
asked the pastor of St. Francis Xavier, when we met with him and the council down there, parish council, do you think that a man dressed as a woman handing out the communion at Mass is sacrilegious? Well, first he refused to answer, but we pressed him. And then he said no.
No.
He considered this
Is it
transvestite
normal?
at Mass handing out
Well,
communion.
I asked the same question
Yeah.
to the head of dignity on Donahue.
Yeah.
And he asked me, what's wrong with that? You know, he asked the question back to me,
If you
what's wrong
ask the
with that? I
question,
said,
you really can't answer them.
Yeah.
I mean,
But
This-
the
the
thing
guy-
is, and the thing is, the reaction, I have talked to young Catholics, and their attitude is, with some of them, some is shocked, but with others, well, what's the big deal about it, you know? This indicates that we have gotten used to anything and everything. In this
We
society.
become desensitized.
Incest, abortion, child molestation, sodomy, it's all the same anymore.
Anything goes.
Anything
hey,
goes.
Karl Marx
It's-
said
it's
we
like-
will take over America without firing a
It's
shot.
like the frog. You drop a frog into a beaker of boiling water, it'll jump out. You put the frog in the beaker where it's lukewarm and then gradually increase the heat. That frog will never jump out even when the water gets boiling because he becomes inured to that increase in heat. He adjusts to it.
Well, I refuse to believe that our frog is boiled.
Well, and he will get boiled and die. Now, this is the condition of this country. We have adjusted and accepted each new
It's sort
abomination,
of destructive
each new
gradualism over a period of
perversion,
time.
and instead of jumping out. Now we're at the point where unless we jump out, unless we react and go back to basic values, we are going to boil.
You said it, we've got to get back to fundamentals.
The fundamentals, right?
Now let's recapitulate what we can do.
Right.
Because we don't want to end up in despair or purvey that attitude to the people who are watching this.
Well, as I said before, Joe, I think AIDS is one of the great hopeful signs because if God was completely disgusted with us, he would have wiped us out now. There would have been a nuclear war, so on and so forth. The fact that it's a gradual thing, the fact that it gives people time to repent, I think is a hopeful sign.
You know,
Okay.
I do think that if this AIDS problem starts to proliferate, as our doctors and scientists tell us it may well do, that this will go a long way to negating the influence of the homosexual network in our community, in our society.
Well, it will. Let me answer that, Andy. As far as AIDS is concerned, the first people it's going to wipe out are the homosexuals. So it's going to take care of that problem, if you like. The other people, the next people will be promiscuous members of society.
That's only part of a much larger problem, isn't it?
Well, yes, it is. It's the end result of where we headed, as
The
Mr.
bottom line.
McCauley very aptly has been pointing out to this discussion. The point is, where do we go from here? What do we do as Catholic laymen
Precisely.
to...
Let's end this discussion on a positive
Okay.
note of action and hope.
Okay, well, this is one of the reasons why my committee is in existence. Morality Action Committee has been fighting all these problems for the last 10 years. Now, you jump from one problem to another. As far as dignity is concerned, we want to get dignity out of every diocese in America. The way to do it is to organize locally in your own diocese. First of all, you've got to find out where the dignity masses are being held. You've got to show up. You've got to see what goes on. You've got to take tape recordings of what goes on. You've got to find out the facts of what is going on in your area. You've got to form your own committee. You have to put pressure on the archdiocese. You have to put pressure on the parish priest. You have to put pressure on the order, if it's an order, and you have to notify Rome and everybody else. In other words, pressure has to be brought to bear. Once a dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen dignity chapters go, the rest will see the writing on the wall, and it'll go down in the domino theory, in my opinion. Now, of course, they're going to be heading for the woods. They're going to be going into people's homes and things of this nature. That would be step 2, and that will be largely up to the bishops And so once they leave, you've got to continue the pressure to prevent the priests
But at least you've
from
removed
going
the public
with them.
scandal of this thing.
You've removed the public scandal.
Yeah.
And if people want to send
Paul, it works.
information to...
We have to re-emphasize the fact that what you're saying, this plan of action works. It really gets results.
Well, it does. It's worked in New York, and New York's one of the toughest nuts to crack around.
Okay, keep going. You're doing
I
great.
might add that I called up another diocese where they're active, where they use 2 churches for masses, and I won't say which one, but they said they're involved in handling the thing right now, and they expect that, to end it. Now, it took me 5 minutes at the most to make that phone call. And anyone could have made it. You don't have to be brilliant, don't have to be a lawyer.
Just make the effort.
I think one of the things that prompted the New York Archdiocese was a woman who just said to the bishop, when are you going to stop this? And
It might take something just like that to do it.
Sometimes go walking right up to the bishop and saying, right flat in his face, when are you going to stop the dignity masses? Your
You're
Excellency.
scandalizing my children.
Right.
Stop it.
How long have I got to tolerate this? How long have I got to be in fear of my children being picked up and introduced into this organization? It's a scandal, and it has to be...
not only that, they're sending a signal not only to the homosexuals, but to everybody out there, especially the young, that if they can say a mass in a Catholic church, that there can't be anything really wrong with it.
Precisely.
And so the kids who maybe
moral legitimacy
so
should
they're
never
going to give kids who young kids may experiment. They think there's nothing really wrong with it. Evelyn Waugh was one time asked, the English author, why there were so many homosexuals among the English upper classes. And he said because nobody ever told them it was wrong. And might have been a glib answer, a facetious answer, but
It speaks volumes.
But I tell you, nobody is saying it's wrong in this country. They look upon it like it's a glorified handshake, and that goes out of it.
Well, look at sex education. I mean, right now in New York, we're trying to fight sex education in the public schools. Well, hey, if you've got masses for homosexuals in the Catholic Church, how effective is that organization, namely the Catholic Church, going to be when they complain about sex education, which includes the legitimizing of the homosexual lifestyle, in public schools? I mean, how effective is that group going to be when they're talking to someone like Nathan Quinones or Robert Wagner of the Board of Education? They're not. They're going to be laughed at is what they're going to be. And so the church has to straighten out its own act before it can start preaching to the outside organizations.
I agree with you wholeheartedly on that one, Paul.
But, the key word, Joe, is sacrifice. Catholics are going to have to make sacrifices.
Well, they've got to be stern themselves.
In time.
Right.
They're going to have to sacrifice time. They're going to have to give up a TV show they wanted to watch. They're going to have to go out on a picket line or to write a letter, or maybe just to say a rosary. They're going to have to miss a party. They're going to have to do this and that. They're going to have to make sacrifices. They're not going to have to do anything heroic. We're not saying they have to charge the barricades, but you're going to have to sacrifice some time and give up things you want to do, because if you don't, you're not really making an effort. Now, Pope John Paul II said that the true test of the authenticity of your faith is action. I had a friend,
Catholic action.
He said action. Action on behalf of the faith, yes. I had a friend, Protestant minister, who's now deceased. He thought that was the greatest saying.
It is.
He often quoted it. I'm talking about the Reverend Roger Fulton.
God rest his soul.
He thought and he was right, because he was an activist, and he was a true Christian. He didn't have the complete faith, but I'm certain
He was a man of goodwill.
But I'm certain that he was within the church spiritually, and
Well, gentlemen,
because he was with Christ.
This has been a most informative and positive discussion, I would believe. And it's come to an end, unfortunately. And I hope what we said here this evening has conveyed the urgency of the situation to those who are watching this program. When you go back in history and you think of St. Dominic and the Albigensian heresy, which was really the homosexual network of its day.
It was.
And no matter how he tried intellectually to defeat this thing, in the end it was picking up his rosary and saying it faithfully. and Mary gave us the victory. And I think the same thing is true here today. We've got to pray, and we've got to work, as you gentlemen have so aptly described to us. And I congratulate you both as being paragons of Catholic action. And with that, we'll close the program. And we thank you for joining us, and to take into account what was said here this evening, and to take the action as God guides us. Thank you.